Okay, welcome to Keith and Sandy to share information with us this afternoon about preventing, recognizing, and reporting restraints. Take it away.
Hey, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Keith Folk. And as Janine had said, we are talking about restraints today, knowing how to prevent, recognize, and report restraints. With that, I will be joining me is Sandy Shackley-White, an education consultant from the Patton East office. We work together for different things from time to time. We hope you find our session informative and applicable to your role in the field of special education. I noticed that there's some people out there that might be pre-service teachers, and we welcome you as well. Again, thank you for joining us. Most of all, thank you for your pursuit in making a difference in the lives of children every day. In our many years in education, that would be Sandy and mine, we see teaching as the purest vocation, being that teaching is not done for money. It's not done for self-gratification or self-serving. It's done by giving of yourself to make a positive difference in the lives of each child and their family. And so we appreciate the energies put forth with that. Marian Wright Edelman basically shares the same thing, and her quote is saying, education is for improving the lives of others and for leaving your community and world better than you found. Please be aware that we are not attorneys, and we have a lot of information in regards to regulations and things along that line, but in regards to interpretation of that, we leave that up to the attorneys. So if in doubt, always use your chain of command process to obtain legal counsel as situation warrants. Okay, so we're going to be starting off with doing basically a poll today to see who's out there within our listening domain. And so with that, Sandy?
Yes, and I set up the poll and it's not saving. So what we would like everybody to do is use the chat box instead rather than waste our time.
Sandy, I can launch the poll if you'd like. I have it on my screen for some reason.
Oh, it came up on you?
Yep.
That you can look at what I typed in?
Yep, I launched it.
Go right ahead. Please indicate what your primary role in special education is. There are a bunch of choices there. Whatever your primary role is, take about 10 seconds to do that.
So Sandy, when you want the other ones launched, I'm sure they'll pop up over here too. Just let me know and I can just hit the launch button.
Sounds good.
Great.
Is the poll showing?
Yes, I see currently, I see 2 college students. I see 1 education lawyer or advocate, a higher ed instructor. Those are the ones I see so far.
Because that is not on my screen, so.
I think I have to end it for the results to pop up on the screen. So
there you go.
We
and
have,
I'm not even,
yeah, 4 of 7 have responded. I don't know if anybody else wants to respond to the poll. Let us know who's on with us. That'd be great. And if
I continue to think of myself as a teacher because that's what I went to school for, and that's the proudest I am of my
There you go. All right, well, why don't I go ahead and end it and you can see the results. And I'll share the results. There you go. So we've got some college students, special ed teacher. There you go.
Okay.
All right, stopped. Okay, back to you.
All right, how do I get off the result things off my, let me see, I just click it off. That's all
just
I have.
click off, yeah.
Yep, okay, very good. Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry about it, it jumped on me.
Oh.
Okay, so again, today what we're going to be doing are our goals for today's presentation. We're going to give you an overview of the matter of generally dealing with behaviors, how to decrease behaviors. I noticed that through the CEC, there was many things that labored out there in regards to the topics today. We're talking about behaviors. And just, again, this is just a general overview. I just want you to be aware that, that the intermediate students across the Commonwealth, as well as Patton, provides lots of trainings in regards to how to look at behaviors and the positive behavior support systems. We're going to provide the audience an overview of restraints. We're going to provide a clear understanding of the restraint information system collection, which we call the RISC system, as it pertains to the educational world. Oops, bear with me, it jumped on me. Also, we want to provide the learner supporting regulation requirements and guidelines pertaining to risk or the restraint system. And then 5, share how the DSC, Bureau of Special Education, uses the risk site and the goals that we're trying to do as we move forward with that risk site. This is just a quick screen talking about as a whole group. We don't have that many, so we could even we'd probably be more interactive as such. But keep mute on unlimited noises. Be aware of your camera and what might be projecting to the group. Like my Mario Lemieux shirt in the background. Use the hand raise option, or else use your chat if you would want to. And again, if you get tired of sitting, please feel free to again stand up, stretch, and we'll go from there and be open to viewpoints of others if it gets to that point where there's a contentious element, which I don't foresee. For the people that are younger learners, what we did, we decided to throw the screen in real quick to show you kind of a channel of the information of what occurs out there that the United States Department of Education throws it out to the Office of Special Education information, as well as the Office of Civil Rights, and to that goes to what's called the Pennsylvania State Education Agency, or PDE, which is SEA. And we're going to be talking about LEA today. And LEAs is the local education agencies, and those are the representations of your public school districts, your charter schools, and your cyber charter schools. So this is
Can I just interject for a second? Do you want to move your little spotlight?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
There you go.
Thank you. So within the positive behavior intervention system, I just want to share again, positive behavior, when we're looking at positive behavior, what you're looking at, and you're always trying to emphasize, is the element of culture, trying to develop a culture, a deep cultural support. And what I mean by that, how the school institution in Pennsylvania should aspire to developing a healthy and positive learning environment. And getting to the culture of a healthy and positive learning environment, this will help significantly curtail inappropriate behaviors, negative behaviors, and then also lessen the restraints. And so we're hoping, that as administrators and teachers and parents all work together, understanding the students, you can decrease the restraints that occur if in fact they are needed to control safety. So positive behavior intervention and support, PBIS as it's known, is a multi-tiered approach that works with social, emotional, behavior support. The whole purpose is improve the effectiveness, efficiency, and equity of schools in regards to how to deal with behaviors more efficiently. In dealing with behaviors, school systems need to look at their institutional systematically. They should start with, now when you talk about positive behavior support, they always talk about school-wide, but I'm going to step it up one further. I'm going to talk to you about district-wide. I was a special ed director for a school district where the superintendent decided to make a difference across the whole district. It was a small district, but what he did, he basically went and got a core amount of people in one system, the middle school trained. And then from that point on, he decided, well, I like this system. I want to expand it to where everybody is using the same terms. They're working together with understanding the culture that we're trying to do, how to develop the terminology, and everybody does that. And so what he started doing is we went through a training process. And then as an administrator, we almost died on this, but he would take us and we would go and train the bus drivers. And so he wanted us to attend that session with him. Then to the cooks. Then, it just went on ancillary staff, to parents, and obviously to the teachers, to the instructional aides. So we must have gone to 6 or 7 or 8 of those trainings that we saw over and over and over again. And we thought, wow, what a waste of our time, but not really, because we were hearing it over and over again as administrators too. So he took it and decided to go district-wide with that, but recognizing then that the school-wide building, when you go to the school building system, you need to look at the culture of those kids in regards to not only the makeup of that, the dynamics of staff, which ones need more training, which ones do not, how to lay that out. Terminologies are similar to the ones like brother's keeper, or let's tell the truth, or things along that line. So you work that basis in regards to that establishing that culture of caring and that we care and we're going to listen and we're going to try to find out those functions and behaviors of some kids that are struggling. So he worked, we worked a lot on that as well. And the school building then also had their own system of classes that would compete to get the prize. But on the other side of that, they would also try to figure out a way to build in where some kids that do not usually have success with their behaviors, somehow randomly they would be caught in on that loop of being successful so that they were part of that group as well. And also in the school building, you had to look at the developmental level of the child. Obviously, middle school is so much more different than elementary, and middle school is so much different than high school. So within that framework of those different supports, you build that in as well. Then at the classroom-wide, recognizing the dynamics of each class, the classrooms are all different too. The teachers, the way they handle their behaviors, the different students, the makeup of the students, the dynamics along those lines. Again, within the classroom-wide, there should be a behavior system where they're all working together as a common group to be successful as a group, and at the same time trying to catch that one kiddo from time to time that doesn't get a lot of rewards that he sometimes does, so he can see success with that as well. And then finally, in the individual, in that classroom, there might be a student or two who are struggling. They might be struggling to the point where you really have to come down to understanding why is that child acting that way? What is the function of the behavior of that child? How do you know what's causing that? Is it something that's happening in the school? Is it the academics? Is it the issues that he's struggling with reading? Is it the dynamics between he and another person? There are so many different things where you have to find out what the function is. And so that's where positive behavior support, you look at that, you look at, do you need a functional behavior assessment to determine what might be the function or functions of that behavior that's causing the student to be frustrated to the point where he's acting out? I think I put somewhere in my notes, so I don't even know if I have it from here, but I want to hit it again, would be it may not be inappropriate behavior. What I mean by that is we put it in the encapsulated as saying it's inappropriate, but that student, if it's an elementary kid who's like in kindergarten come in, may not know it's an inappropriate behavior for him yet because he's never known anything other than that behavior. So you have to look and see what's the function that's causing. And the key with all that function of that is, again, working with that student, working with the staff that might be outside of that classroom too, and also working with the home. So you find the function, you provide the intervention of maybe some supports, but you have to look at what skill deficit maybe that boy or girl doesn't have that you need to also develop that skill set with them. You develop positive interventions, understanding what needs to be done, recognizing there are consequences, but again, the point of the matter is looking at and consequences, making sure everybody's safe. But the point is always trying to work with that student to improve himself. So if you develop a culture along that line, and sometimes it takes time, sometimes it takes a lot of time. But if you really focus on those things and minimize those behaviors, and what we found within that district, just because the whole district-wide, the whole culture of that was seen, behaviors dropped and academics went up across all domains. So the key is always looking at, especially if any administrators are here today, looking at how you can really look at your culture and say, okay, do I need to change some things? Do I need more training? And again, within the home setting, don't forget that parents might need some training as well.
Okay, let me pick up from here. We're going to do what's called a chat brainstorm. And I'm going to give you a prompt in a few seconds. What I need you to do is open up your chat box, wait for my prompt. You will then type in your response to the question or the prompt, and then you're going to wait until we tell you to hit enter. That's the brainstorm that all of us will be typing in our answer to the prompt. So it's, again, open up your chat box, get ready to type, wait for my cue to hit enter or to send it so that everybody's submitting at the same time. And then we'll kind of do a little debrief as to what you've all written. So get your chat box ready. And here is the prompt or the question for you. What is a restraint? Type in your response to what is a restraint. I'll give you about 10, 15 seconds. And Keith, when I give the cue, hit the space bar, because then my little thingy will pop up.
Okay.
Okay, everybody go. Hit enter.
Now I hit the space bar.
Okay, there should be a thing floating in to say go.
There we go.
There it is. Okay, so I'm seeing some responses coming in. Restricting movement of the student, holding someone back from hurting themselves or others. Attempt to keep person under control. A form to keep a student still. A restraint is something that keeps someone from moving. Thank you for that.
Very nice. All good information, good answers along that line. Again, my name is Keith Folk, and one of the things that I'm charged with in my job at the Department of Ed on the Bureau of Special Education is I am charged with what is called the risk system and looking at restraints. So obviously the first thing we need to know when we're looking at that different reports that are coming in is what is a restraint. And under the PA code, again, there's a school code called 22 PA school code. Under chapter 14133 and also under the 711, which is, so 1411 is basically the, like we had shared with you before, the public schools. 711 is your charters and cyber charter school codes. It says the application of physical force with or without the use of any device for the purpose of restraining the free movement of a student or eligible young student or young child's body. The term does not include briefly holding without force a student or eligible young child to calm or comfort him, a hug, a guide, or guiding a student or eligible student to an appropriate activity, or holding a student or eligible child's hands to safely escort him or her from one area to the other. So if you have their hand and you're guiding them this way, is not a restraint. It's not a restraint. The term
You can move your spotlight.
Sure. Keep cueing me on that.
We'll get it.
Yeah. The term does not include hand-over-hand assistance with feeding or task completion and techniques prescribed by a qualified medical professional for reasons of safety or for therapeutic or medical treatment as agreed to by the student or eligible young child's parents and specified in the IEP. Devices used for physical or occupational therapy, seat belts and wheelchairs, or on toilets used to balance and safety. Safety harnesses in buses and functional positional devices are examples of mechanical restraints which are excluded from the restraint category along that line, from this definition. So when you have an OT or a PT basically sharing that there might need to be some sort of belts or safety apparatus along that line, again, they provide that as a suggestion within the IEP. However, as I said before, these different techniques need to be prescribed by a qualified medical professional for reasons of safety as well. So in addition to the PT or OT. Another one, mechanical restraints which are used to control involuntary movement or lack of muscular control of students when due to organic causes or conditions may be employed only when specified by an IEP and as determined by that medical professional qualified to make that determination and as agreed to by the student's parents. Mechanical restraints shall prevent a student from injuring himself or others or promoting normative body positions in physical functioning.
So Keith, just to clarify, mechanical restraints are not reportable restraints.
Almost. Next slide. When a student is handcuffed, it is considered a restraint. That is a mechanical restraint. I don't know if you cued me that on purpose or not, but anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. Handcuffs are not allowed under Chapter 14. If there is a student handcuffed, we see it in the risk report system or the restraint system, the Bureau of Special Education will investigate any school-age student who has an IEP and was handcuffed and slashed or tased. Does tased happen? Hardly ever. I can only say once in 7 years that I'm aware of. And that was a circumstance that was unique. Now, what we did within this here of the PowerPoint is I decided to put in these two favorites. And I thought, well, if you have this, you might want to bookmark them because, again, it just basically provides you the different behaviors under Chapter 14, which is your public schools, and then your cyber charter schools. I thought you might want to use that as a reference. So we put that as well for you. So you go into the slides, pull this out, bookmark them as your favorites maybe, so you can really look, because the heart of positive behavior support, what we look for when we go through compliance monitoring, when we're auditing districts or charter schools or cyber charter schools, that 2-page document has so much in it talking about positive behavior support, risk, safety, and things that we do, and those are the 2 chapters, and there's the hyperlinks.
Okay, since we have a small group, we're not going to do the breakout rooms. What we would like you to do is take about 1 minute to think about this quote that's from Lady Bird Johnson. Consider it in your answer to the question in the header of the slide when we go to the breakout rooms, which we're not going to do. So thinking about the quote, children are apt to live up to what you believe of them. Think about that and just jot down some thoughts. And how does this quote relate to what we're discussing in terms of restraints and behavioral interventions and prevention? So you can doodle your response, jot an answer down, and then when we come back in about 1 minute, we will ask for any volunteers to share their thoughts connecting the quote to our topic today.
Sandy, will you want me to unmute people or unmute everybody? How would you like to handle that?
Yes, they can raise their hand and then you can unmute them. That'd be great.
Okay.
Okay, take about 10 more seconds. Finish up your thought or your doodle, whatever you're jotting down. Okay, and use your icons to raise your hand and share out whatever your thoughts are to connect the quote with today's topic. Nobody wants to share?
I will share.
Sure, Keith.
I can always share. If anybody knows me, I can always talk.
That is true.
But Sharon wants to talk.
Oh, wait, Sharon.
Oh, good. Let me
Thank you,
unmute you.
Sharon.
Try to.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay, I'm trying to, oh, I guess I can't start my video. Hello. I always want to talk. I think that when we anticipate that students will do well, and when we notice that they aren't doing well and we become curious about why that may be, that is hopefully when we can start examining how we can better support them in meeting expectations and believing that everyone can, but might need support too, is a difference maker.
Thank you. Okay, looking at time, Keith, I think we could move on.
I just want to share out real quick.
Oh, sure.
I'll make it quick. On the other side of the coin too, as an emotional support itinerant that I served once within an IU, one of the hardest things to do was to go in and try to work with staff that had already formed a bias, because they've lived it, they experienced it. And so within the working with the teaching system, I think that you need to always keep coming back and trying to, it goes back to that function. You can figure out what the function is, that helps you a little bit more with your bias, because you might say, oh, wow, I never thought of that. So sometimes you need to be more open to understanding. And sometimes with those functional behavior assessments, they come up with things that you didn't even think of, which really reflects on that maybe more training might be necessary. So moving on.
So now we're going to talk about monitoring restraints.
Thank you. Yes. Why do we monitor restraints? And that's one of the things looked at here. Well, the reason why we monitor it, because again, there's school code. It basically says that we're supposed to be that school entities shall maintain and report data on the use of restraints as prescribed by the secretary. So one reason we monitor is because the secretary basically gets a report. The report basically goes to him every year, or her this year, and they review that. So this report will be reviewed during the cyclical compliance monitoring too. So what we do is we do the report because, again, under school code, it tells us we need to monitor it. How do we monitor it? Same regulation. Shall maintain and report data on the use of the restraints. So what we do is we basically collect data. How we do that is the responsibility that all LEAs, that local education agencies, which again, public schools, charter schools, cyber charter schools, are required to, that any time that a student is a school age who has an IEP, again, school age and an IEP, and is restrained, that has to be reported into the risk system. The risk system is, again, an online system with a template format that they're supposed to fill out. You basically, they go in and they put in the date it occurred, the student's PA secure ID number. We don't ask for name, when it occurred, and that tells us when it went into the system as well, what hold was done, what disability category the kiddo was, what was the behavior before that occurred, what did they do, what was the behavior that they were worried about, and how did they deal with the behavior afterwards. And then also in regulations, it says, and we'll come to this later, you're supposed to convene an IEP within 10 days. It tells us if they convene that IEP or not, the individualized education plan of that student or not, and what in fact they did with that. So that template format, anytime that it occurs out there in the Commonwealth, in any of the LEAs, where there's a restraint from an IEP kiddo, so you have to put that information into the electronic system, then that comes to us here at the risk system at the Bureau of Special Education. So it is a reporting data system monitored by us. And then what we do is we request that, there used to be every year they were supposed to put that information in. We hope they do it as soon as they have the IEP meeting. But what we do expect them to do is 4 times a year, as you can see on the quarters here, that they were supposed to report every quarter. And this is the beginning date, this is the end date, and then this is the last date to report. And then what happens is some people don't have any, so we have a window from the 1st to the 18th that opens up to allow them to report 0 for that quarter. So as you can see right now, we are in a 0 window quarter right now. So anybody who has, that still has to report, needs to report for the 1st quarter, but they also have to, if they have 0, they have to hit that window. This time, anytime from here to here, they can report a restraint. Here to here is when they report a window of 0. So you're aware. It's called a pen link, and maybe some people don't know what a pen link is. It's a system where we send it out to across the Commonwealth of what is required of the educational institutions. It's a way that we give them information saying, pass this down the line, people need to know about this. So, bear with me while I catch up on my notes. Local aging, okay, what is risk? Again, as I said before, LEAs are responsible for reporting restraints that have occurred within their, with their students being serviced through IEPs who have been restrained, either within their building, so if they have students that are in their buildings, or if they send a student into the IU programs, or if they have a student in the APS, or in the licensed private academic schools. The responsibilities are that if it was an APS or licensed private academic, we have a template format online on the RISC site. They fill it out and send it to the LEAs. The LEAs then send it to us through that system, that electronic system. And what that is, it's just, on our site, we have that listed in the pen link is listed in that risk system. So when they go into report, they keep seeing what their timelines are to be able to report for that quarter.
And just as a reminder that there is a QR code on the handouts that were uploaded for today's conference. And I also have put into the chat box the link to the Padlet that has all of these documents that Keith has been talking about, as well as some additional resources that you might find helpful.
So, a little reflection. In a perfect world, we wouldn't need risk. If we understand the function of the student's behavior, there's a good chance we can minimize it from occurring again. If we recognize the student's behavior, the function of the student's behavior, we could teach him the skills that he needs to do. If we provide supplemental aids and supports, maybe more supports, because he might need a little bit more supports or a little bit more training with the teachers and his teacher aides and the interactions, or understanding the disabilities, so many different variables. We do all those things and understand the function and include all those different supports. You would hope at that point in time that we would minimize some of the behaviors and definitely decrease the restraints that occur across the Commonwealth. So when we're looking at school-wide positive behavior support, we're always pushing out to the districts, trainings. Are your staff trained in positive behavior, school-wide positive behavior support? So keep in mind that behavior is communication and therefore information to inform ways to teach rather than punish. We should always try to do that. Are there circumstances where you have consequences? Sure, along that line. Sometimes restorative justice, as they say, where somebody does something wrong, they learn they were wrong, they need to figure out how to make it right. That's a good skill set to have. But always, again, ask yourself, what is the function of the student's behavior? I don't know how many times as a special ed director did I have my staff, we talked about that over and over again until if there was a behavior occurred, that's the first thing we would ask. Because we didn't want to look at the reaction of how it's in fact interfering our school system. We had to address safety and everything online, but the first thing to do is, can we use that very quickly if we understand the function? And again, remember, past learned behaviors may take time. So what I want to share with you is, and I don't know if this is in the next page, it isn't, but I'm going to talk about right now, is in the issue of you're supposed to convene an IP after a restraint occurs, you have 10 days to do that. Sometimes parents, if they want to, they can waive, if they share that they want to waive an IEP, meaning put it in writing, they can waive that IEP. Sometimes they waive an IEP, meaning only because the behavior they're working on needs some time to work, the interventions that they're trying. So if you, every day for 5 days, you see the same behavior in the intervention, you're trying to teach a skill, sometimes it takes time to change that behavior. And so sometimes the IEP decides to waive that IEP, and they have that as an option as well. Okay, quick exercise. A student is self-abusing himself by scratching his arms until they bleed. He's doing it because, and I want you to choose one of these, what you think it might be. He doesn't like the work that is being asked of him. He doesn't like the transition from one activity to another. He had a fight, argument at home and carried it into school. He likes to scratch himself because it feels good. He doesn't like students' voice next to him that is next to him. Or it's a behavior he developed in the summer and carried it into school.
And we're going to use the chat room to pick the letter or letters of how you wish to answer that. So just type in whatever your options are when you think about it. Keith, can you reiterate what we're trying to ask them to do?
Yeah, I just want you to pick one of the ones that you think that it might be.
What he's trying to communicate through that self-abuse.
Right.
Somebody says it could be any of these. The FBA hasn't gone far enough yet.
Oh, that person is so wise, and that's so true. In this circumstances, was because he liked to scratch himself because it felt good. You know, sometimes when you have a scab and it's bothering, it's itching, and you scratch it and it feels good, and then what you do is you cut it open. So what we had to do, we basically had to put the sleeve on his arm so he wouldn't, but at the same time also provide substitute behaviors for him to do that, using his hand, keeping his hands busy until they heal. So you have to look at so many different scenarios, and that is so true. And that's the whole point of this exercise, is there's many reasons for functions that cause inappropriate behavior or behaviors that we see and think what's going on. And so that's why sometimes you have to be a detective and you have to work through and to get an understanding of that.
And I think key is remembering that behavior is communication. It's information for us to be able to support and teach the student, the youth. Because remember, we want to be teaching, not punishing. We want to be as positive with our interventions as possible and fade them over time. So always think about behavior as a method of communication, and it's figuring out what is that youth communicating and how can we help.
Okay, so RIS. It's a reporting system required by all LEAs across the Commonwealth. It's a reporting data system monitored by the PDE and BSC. It is a monitoring system of all restraints which occur to school-age students within that LEA system, the local education system. It is one of the tools used within special education audits under positive behavior support to determine if LEAs are complying with special education guidelines and regulations. It is also a tool that helps LEAs look at their data, because what we're developing right now within the risk is so that they can look and see multiple years to see if in fact their culture is working within their LEAs, or for that matter, how many kiddos are going out and coming back in from different like APSs or licensed private academic schools. And it also is a system used to provide an annual report to the Secretary of Education. Okay, I'm going to run through some more of the guidelines here, some of the regulations. When RIS was formed way back, I'll say, I'm not quite how many years, 10 or so years ago, they developed guidelines and all that. And one of the guidelines basically says, for a student whose behavior impedes his or her own learning or the learning of others, the IEP team must consider strategies and supports, including positive behavior interventions to address that behavior. Restraints are a measure of last resort and may be used only after less restrictive measures, including de-escalation techniques that have been used by personnel working in the education program. The use of physical restraints is limited to controlling acute or episodic aggressive behaviors or self-injurious behaviors when student is acting in a manner that is clear and present danger to himself, to other students, or to employees, and only when less restrictive measures and techniques have been proven to be less effective. So even if you're looking at a behavior and a student's not behaving in the classroom and he's kind of being a little rowdy, maybe the first thing, which is a less restrictive system, would be giving him the teacher glare, saying you better straighten out. Second thing might be the matter of that the teacher might go over and tap a desk, or proximity, come closer. The third intervention might be going over after that and maybe putting the hand on the student's shoulder, you know, or basically. The fourth thing on the sequence of less to more restraints or more interventions would be talking to the child. Next thing might be asking the child to come someplace to talk to them. So there are some progressions. You don't have to go sequence all the time, but when you're looking at behavior interventions, try to start with less interventions and move down to more restrictive systems. And the last thing at the end of the game is the restraint. Here is the one that I was saying about before in the 14.133. Again, there's that chapter 14 guideline in 133, which you have that reference now. It says the use of restraints to control the aggressive behavior of an individual student or eligible young child shall cause the school entity to notify the parent of the use of the restraint. And in our guidelines, we usually say within 2 1 to 2 days, preferably that same day. Notify the parents of the use of the restraint and shall cause a meeting of the IEP team within 10 school days of the inappropriate behavior causing the use of the restraint, unless the parent, as I had noted before, after written notice, agrees in writing to waive the meeting. At this meeting, the IEP team shall consider whether the student or eligible young child needs a functional behavior assessment, reevaluation, a new or revised positive behavior support plan, or a change of placement to address the inappropriate behavior. That in itself doesn't say that if you have behavior you act out, you should be kicked out. What that's saying, that's one of the continuous, one of the discussion points that might be made. The use of restraints may only be, again, 14.133C2. The use of restraints may only be included in the student's or eligible young child's IEP when the following conditions occur. The restraint is utilized with specific component elements of positive behavior support, which I had just mentioned. The restraint is used in conjunction with the teaching of socially acceptable alternative skills to replace problem behaviors. Again, teaching them that skill set maybe that child does not have. Number 3, staff are authorized to use the procedure and have received the staff training required. That's a biggie, that across the Commonwealth, most, because I'm sure there's a few that maybe haven't kept up, but they go through training every year about positive behavior support, the theory base of how you should be positive, what you should be doing. But part of those, and there's different systems out there that are out there, we don't subscribe to any of them. It's up to if they follow the guidelines that we have in there. And but what I'm trying to share with you is that LEAs go through training all the time with this in regards to if you have to restrain a child, do you have the skill set to be able to do that to where you can do it in a safe way? And if we see, again, looking at the risk system, that people are not trained, again, that'll send out what we call an R3, where the advisor will go out and investigate. And that there's a place, this is a key, if you put it in the IEP, you better make sure there's a plan in place to eliminate that restraint, saying that you better go in and check time to time to make sure that you're trying to eliminate the need of that restraint by teaching those skill sets and providing the supplemental aids and support. And the use of restraints may not be included in the IEP for the convenience of staff, as a substitute for education program, or employed as punishment. I had mentioned this to you before. And again, I had mentioned that to you before too about the issue of last resort. Somehow it jumped on me, I apologize. The other thing I want to bring to your attention is law enforcement involvement. As we get SROs and police officers and school police officers, state police officers, all those people involved right now in the school systems, basically says here that, again, under Chapter 14, subsequent to referral to law enforcement, the student with disabilities who have positive behavior support plans, an updated functional behavior assessment and positive behavior support plans shall be required. So what we're saying is this: if there's a law enforcement person involved, all those involved, be it to handcuff, tase, or charge under safe school violation, not if they're involved in the restraint, because there are so many that are working with restraints. If we see something wrong with the restraints, we would go out and investigate. But if we see somebody who's handcuffed by an officer, tased, or if charged under safe school violation, and what I mean by that is every principal or CEO has to fill out what's called a safe schools report. And there's certain things that they have, that's mandatory, they have to report to the police. Terroristic threat to the police, bringing a weapon, definitely mandatory. There's a list of them under the safe school system. So if they're charged under a safe school violation or handcuffed or tased, we as the Bureau of Special Education will come out and investigate. Also, I want to bring to your attention, this is safe schools. Under safe schools, they have a section there to how to deal with students with the issue of disabilities, how to respond to that. And again, this is for your reading. I'm not sure what our time is. We're getting close, but a school entity shall, first thing is, the school entity shall invite representatives of each local police officers, departments that have jurisdiction over the property for trainings. It doesn't say that the police officers have to go to the training. It says they shall invite them. And the police can say, no, I think we're okay with what we have. So that's up to them. But the part I want to share with you is the E and G is for a student with a disability who has a positive behavior support plan. Upon notification to a local police department that a student with a disability has committed an incident under those two sections, and number 4.1 is the mandatory, and number 4.2 is what's called discretionary, where the principal can decide if they want to file charges. If that occurs, then they basically have to follow that regulation. Similarly with ones here, this one talks about ones that do not have a positive behavior support plan, that they would possibly have to do consider whether a positive behavior support plan should be developed. But I just wanted to make that connection of Chapter 14, Special Ed, Safe Schools. They have it embedded right there too. That brings those two regulations together. And again, I throw out here that the positive behavior support regulatory information and the guidelines that we have as well for the risk system.
We have about 8 minutes left, Keith.
All right, this is just a reflection to people that are coming into the educational world, or the teachers out there that are trying to work through the person-to-person, the hybrid model, or the total virtual, that recognize if you're working with children, students, and they're struggling and there's behaviors, reach out to the parents too, because you can provide different interventions that can work with trying to work with the behaviors, so that if you go back to person to person, that you're building some capacity in regards to the behavior, providing supports to the parents. You just have to be more creative with that. I watch my son, he's a PT, working with kiddos that might be in preschool that don't want to work, and how he gets so creative in getting them to work. It's pretty fun to watch, but he's very creative. Okay, what causes the Bureau to investigate? Well, again, real quick, here we have 29, the Commonwealth is broken into 29, I don't know how that did that, hold on for a minute. 29 IU regions. I'm sitting in IU 15 right now. But anyway, what happens is every one of these IU regions is assigned a Bureau of Special Education advisor. Philadelphia has probably about 10, Pittsburgh has a few more there too, but typically there's one in each of these. And what happens is they work with the special education audit, they develop relationships. If there's issues there, that advisor goes to the LEA or the charter schools and discusses with them what they, to see if they can come up with a resolution, how to make things work. And so when we read the risk reports and we see something that is needed to be investigated, we send that information to the Bureau of Special Education advisor of that region, and that person then goes out to the LEA, or now virtually goes out and talks to the well, hybrid maybe, or person to person, goes out and talks to the LEA and sees, this is what we see, is this true or not? How are you going to resolve it? An example of that, if somebody was restrained for 50 minutes, that's pretty extensive time. We could very well send, or else the child has been restrained 5 restraints in 5 days, and it was 30, 50, 50, 50, something, you know, obviously there needs to be a meeting and they only had waivers. We'll send that advisor out and say, hey, how are you going to resolve this? What's going on? So that's what we do. We utilize our Bureau of Special Education advisors. We as advisors give that information to them because they have more relationships with those LEAs in their jurisdiction. We will investigate when we talked about mechanical. We'll basically do it when law enforcement is involved in safe schools, that we said, excessive restraints over 60, multiple injuries occurring, patterns of excessive holds, excessive law enforcement involvement. Like if I see a police officer being more and more, and I'm wondering why is that not the educational team working with them versus law enforcement, that might be something that we look at to see if the team might need more training. High waiver count without reconvening an IEP, because we're thinking, okay, if you have 15, 20 waivers, you're past the time of waiting for an intervention to work. Why are you doing this? Because you should try to extinguish those restraints, and you can't do that unless you have an IEP meeting. Serious injuries also, or if staff aren't trained. Any of those reasons there could dictate a reason for us to send out an advisor to investigate to see if there needs to be a resolution plan. And again, this is basically that we do an audit every 6, I wonder why that jumps on me. We do an audit with the LEAs every 6 years, and with that, this is the statement basically saying that they look at this information historically, year after year of those 6 years to see if, in fact, how they're utilizing their positive behavior support plan, how the restraints are, if they've gone up or gone down, those type of things to determine if, in fact, at our end, we're monitoring as well as we're hoping they're self-monitoring. So I mentioned this all before, that they basically, advisors receive an R3, we call that a restraint request form. And I shared with you what it looked like. I'm going to show you real quick. That's the first part of it. As I said before, it has all those different things that they have to fill out. The district, the answers to questions that the LEA and the advisors have to discuss together. And then out of that, what's the recommendation? Was there further training or not? An example of this would be if I see a person who had 80 minutes, and what it was a clerical error. It was 8 seconds, because we have a minute section and or 80 seconds. They put 80 there, and it gives hour and it gives seconds. And so sometimes they put, lots of times we have clerical errors, and we go out and check to see if that's the case, and that's then basically void of any need for resolution. So our goals. We're going to provide we have a webinar right now out there for all the risk reporters, so all the LAAs can go in that webinar so that they know how to report. We present at the Special Education Advisory Panel, which we're going to be doing this November. We present at the PALS Leadership Series. We did a PALS, what do you call it, webinar or whatever, which Cindy helped me with that. And we have that for the PALS Day. We have gone to the APS Alliance meetings they meet throughout the year about how they're doing within the APS as a group, the approved private schools. We continue to monitor the LEAs and the APSs across and licensed private academic restraints across the Commonwealth. And we guide LEAs and education entities to seek training at local intermediate units and patent sites in regards to positive behavior support. Because if we keep pushing positive behavior support, how to deal with the culture, you should have less problems with restraints.
And that's pretty much our goal, isn't it? To reduce to elimination.
Absolutely. So we had already talked about all that. We're hoping to develop more of an interactive network system with the LEAs so that they can look at multiple years and look at patterns. So we're doing that as well. And we're also doing that with the advisors. So when they go out for cyclical monitoring, they can have that data with a touch, with just pushing a button.
Okay, and since we're wrapping up,
sorry, I had to talk fast, but we were getting close.
We're getting close. So what we'd like you to do is think about what we just talked about for the past hour, and in the chat room you can type in a pedal, which is a solid takeaway, something that you're taking with you to remember. A bud, which is an emerging idea, a budding idea that's come to you during the past hour. And then a thorn, what's one thing that's not necessarily resonating well with you right now. So take the last minute or two to type in a response to any or all three of those items. It's sort of like a ticket out the door, trying to end with a positive beauty of a rose. So use the chat room and just type in your reflections on today.
I want to thank you for your time today and recognize you do have my information if you ever want to contact me. We're pretty busy here within the risk system, but at the same time, I think we're making a difference, and we move forward.
And then Keith, did you want to go to the next slide?
Sure. You want to read it?
And we want to make sure that based on Maria Montessori, let us remember that the child is both a hope and a promise for mankind. Every child is a whole child. There's somebody's son, daughter, a best friend, a kiddo who can play basketball well, might play violin well, might be good at baking. They have more strengths than their disabilities. And let's always keep that in mind and get that message out to everybody who's a stakeholder in a child's life.